Hi everyone. Today I'm going to tell you a story of a king from Bhagavata Purana, an ancient epic with 18,000 verses. He was a king who had everything. He was powerful. He was extremely attractive. He had read all the great books, the great scriptures of the world. He had studied all the neighboring kingdoms. They accepted his sovereignty. He had thousands of wives, the most beautiful women ready to serve him. And yet, he was very unhappy. There was a pinprick in his life, and the reason for that was because he had no son. So one would think that despite having everything in life, he would be the happiest person. But actually, he considered himself to be extremely unfortunate. He would toss and turn all night long, unable to go to sleep. Sometimes in the evenings, he would disguise himself and go for a walk in the kingdom, trying to assess his subjects and see how they were doing. One evening, as he was walking, he came across a mother who lived in a thatched hut, and her roof had more holes than hay. And yet she sat at the threshold of her hut with a little baby in her arms, singing to her little baby, putting him to sleep. And this is how she sang. Lullaby and good night. In the sky stars are bright. Close your eyes and now rest. Let these hours be blessed. At that moment, she looked so happy and content. And the king was mesmerized when he saw her, and he felt a pang in his heart and felt, oh, I wish I had a son I could sing to. He kept walking, and as he walked along the way, he came across another family. And in this case, the father had his son seated on his lap, and he was speaking to him about the intricacies of this ancient art of medicine. And he was telling him that one day you are going to be the greatest medicine man this world has ever seen, because I'm going to teach you the deepest secrets. The king, when he saw that, felt that his heart was broken all over again in a million pieces, and he decided to turn back and go back to his palace. He rushed into his palace, into his room, and he closed the door and just didn't want to see anyone anymore. You know how it is sometimes when we're just feeling so sad, we just don't want to talk to anyone. He stayed in his room for the next few days, and everyone was concerned that the king was not coming out and doing his work. Now one day, Sage Angira happened to arrive at his kingdom, and the guards went and knocked on the door of the king and told him that Sage Angira had arrived. And when the king heard that, he just felt a surge of joy and hope, and he opened his doors and he ran out to the gates of his palace to receive the sage. He fell on the ground when he saw the sage, and he offered his obeisances. And he welcomed the sage into his palace, and he had him sit down on a high chair, and he himself sat on the ground. And he looked up at the sage, his hands folded. Now, sages have this unique quality that they are able to read and see what's within the core of a person's heart. So the sage could tell that the king was not happy. So he spoke to the king and he said, "My dear king, I see that your kingdom is flourishing. Your enemies are powerless in front of you. And everyone in your kingdom see you as a benevolent father. And yet, I do see that you are very unhappy. What is the cause of your unhappiness?" So the king folded his hands and he said, "My dear sage, you know the past and the present and the future. You know the grief of my heart. You're right, I have everything a person can ever wish for. But I feel bereft and unfortunate. And the reason is because I have no son." The sage spoke wise words to the king and said, "Do not lament, O king. The ways of destiny are hard to understand. And real wisdom is to accept what one cannot change." But the king would not accept that. And so he begged the sage and he said, "Oh sage, you can change the course of destiny. Such is your power. So please, by your powers, please bless me with a son." So the sage said, "All right, if that's what you wish, I'll perform a sacrifice, and from that sacrifice will emerge a sacrificial fruit. You can go and give that fruit to your favorite queen, and she will bear you a son. But be warned, that son will be known as Harsha Shoka, which means one who will bring you great happiness, but also who will be the cause of great sorrow and lamentation." The king simply bowed his head and said, "I accept, O dear sage." And in his own heart, he thought, "That's all right. Maybe he'll be mischievous and he might create a lot of difficulties because of his mischief. But isn't it better to have a mischievous son than to not have a son at all?" So he was happy. So the sage performed a sacrifice and gave a sacrificial fruit to the king, which he then gave to his queen, his favorite queen, Queen Kritaduti. And in due course of time, the queen gave birth to a beautiful prince. Everyone in the kingdom, they were overjoyed when the prince was born, and they came out with their bugles and their drums and their trumpets, and they sang and danced on the streets. Na dir dir ta di ta ta ni tum ta na tum ta na tum. The king could not believe his good fortune, and he started to spend every waking minute with the prince. As soon as his kingly duties was over, he would run to the palace of Queen Kritaduti, and he would talk to the baby and feed the baby and rock the baby and sing to the baby, and he was just so happy. And the queen was very happy, and everyone in the kingdom were so happy that they finally had a prince. But there were some that were not at all happy. And these were the thousands of queens of King Chitraketu, who now felt completely neglected. And the king would hardly even visit them. So they fumed and they smoked and they were angry and they were resentful and they were jealous. And they all came together one evening to talk about their plight. So one of them said, since this Queen Chitraketu has had a son, the king doesn't even look at me. And the other queen said, yes, I don't remember the last time the king visited my palace. And the third queen said, I am the daughter of the powerful king. And my father didn't raise me to live as a maidservant. Fie! Even my maidservant has better life than me. And the fourth one said, but what can we do? We are helpless women. How do we get the king to notice us again? And the fifth one said, stop feeling sorry for yourself. We are warrior women, and we will reclaim what is rightfully ours. And then the sixth one spoke up and said, well, I have a plan. Come closer, all of you. Come. Here, this is potent poison. One drop, and the prince will be done for. Put to sleep. That's murder! That's a crime! Oh, so you think what the king is doing to us is not a crime? And the other queen said, yes, you're right. Maybe this is the only thing we can do. How do you plan to do this? Well, I am going to mix this poison in the cup of sweet rice that the nurse will feed the prince. No one has to know. This is just between us. That's what the queen did. She mixed the poison, and the nurse fed the prince. And the prince went to sleep in the afternoon, and he didn't wake up. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And the nurse started to feel concerned, and so she went and tried to call out to the prince, oh, prince, please wake up, it's time. Your friends are waiting to play with you. No response. And so the nurse went closer to the bed, and she saw that the prince was not moving. She tried to touch him, and his body was cold. And then she brought a cotton swab and put it under his nostrils, and it would move. And the nurse was horrified, and she knew that the prince had left this body. And so she called out to the king and the queen and said, oh, king, oh, queen, please come. Our prince is no more. He doesn't breathe. He doesn't talk. Please come. So the king and the queen, they came running, tumbling, falling on the ground with tears in their eyes. And the king said, oh, my dear son, please don't leave us. How will we continue without you? How will we live our lives if you leave us? Your mother, she waits with milk in her breast. How will she continue without your beautiful face? Oh, Providence, you are so cruel. And is this intelligent on your part to separate a son while the parents are still alive? If you do this, who will choose to give birth in the future? Oh, "No, son, please don't leave us behind in this way. We will not be able to continue our lives if you depart. Please come back. Oh, dear prince, please come back." And the king and the queen wailed and they wept and they cried and they fell on the ground and they fainted. And just at that time, Sage Angira and Sage Narada happened to come to the palace one more time. And when the king saw them, he just rushed to their feet and fell at their feet and wept and shed torrents of tears. And the sages said, "O king, birth and death are inevitable, and no one can change that. And one must learn to tolerate that." And the king said, "No, please don't say that. Please don't say that you can change the course of my destiny. Please bring my son back to life." So the sage Narada said, "All right, I will invite your son back into this body." And so he called out to the prince and said, "Look at your parents. They are weeping in separation from you. Please re-enter this body and continue to rule and give pleasure to your parents." So the soul of the prince re-entered the dead body. And when he re-entered, he sang a song. He sang, "Who is my father? Who is my mother? Countless wombs I have entered. King's might, a child's delight. I am not one of these labels. I am a soul, a boundless rover, many lives with many mothers. I am a soul beyond reproach, my freedom none can encroach. I am a soul no one can own. I am a soul free to roam." When the king heard these words, the song of his son, he felt his grief disappearing from his heart and his lamentation drying out. He had a moment of clarity where he could see that he was actually not this body and that his son was really a gift and didn't really belong to him. He was a soul as well, free to travel in this universe, and he was given to him for a brief period of time, and he couldn't really control the movements of his child. He folded his hands and he said, "I release you, my dear son. You're free to go where you need to go, and I'm grateful for the time that you have spent in my palace with me." And then the king cremated the young prince, took his ashes, scattered them in the holy rivers, and felt great peace and acceptance within his heart for whatever life wanted to give or not give him. And he continued to rule his kingdom, treating each of his citizens, the trees, the animals, each citizen in his country as his own child. Thank you.